Hello creeps! Andy here, and today I wanted to make a list of the best books I read in 2020. They weren't all published in 2020, they're just the books that I read this year. However, some of them are from this year, at least a few of them that I know of that were published this year. But these are just the best books that I've read this year, and I would like to share them with you. This is a list of everything. Mostly it's like horror, mystery, sci-fi, thriller kind of books, but there are some other options in there. There's some romance and other stuff kind of thrown in. But let's just get started because these are the best books that I have read this year. Okay, so these are just in the order of which I read them this year. The first one that I want to recommend is Who Goes There by John Campbell. This is the novella that the movie The Thing is based on. I talk about this book every year because I read it every year. It's honestly just one of my favorite little short sci-fi reads. I think I will also read this and do another movie verse book. I did one a long time ago, but I think I want to do more of a detailed version. So that is definitely one to read this year and one of the best books that I read. Next up, we have Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. I don't even know really what category this would be in besides fiction, but it is an interesting read. So it's not horror like American Psycho is, but it is in the same universe as American Psycho. But it's not a prequel to it, but I guess how I would talk about this book would be like, you read American Psycho or watch the movie American Psycho and you're like, how could anybody end up this fucked up? And then you read Less Than Zero and you're like, got it. It's just a bunch of kids that like don't really have, they have all the money in the world, but they have like no support system. No one's really there for them. They're all kind of fucked up in their own way. It's a hard read. Like it is a challenging read. So yeah, that was definitely one of the books that really surprised me this year. I don't know why I would be that surprised because I absolutely adore Bret Easton Ellis, but that one really got to me. Next up, we have Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. This one blew me away too. This was my summer book recommendation for this year, one of the horror books, and I just adore this. I love this so much. It's about a group of young boys who are trying to save their town from some supernatural occurrences, but there's just so much nostalgia and camaraderie and young friendship and just so many cool, fun things to read. I absolutely adored this book and it was one of my favorites that I read this year. I'm just looking at my list because I know there are a few that I don't actually have with me, so I don't want to miss them. The next one was this guy. This is The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is by Felicitas D. Goodman. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly either. But basically this, you know the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose? It's based on this. It's based on this girl's story. She was a young girl from Germany, and she was supposedly possessed by a demon, or multiple demons, I suppose. This is one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. Truly, still, it is not on my bookshelf. I keep it in my closet because I just don't even want to look at it because it freaked me out. Possession stuff really gets to me. So if you want to have nightmares, highly recommend this guy. It's just a horrible, horrendous story, but I think it's an important book to read to know like what happened to this poor girl. Yeah, it's a rough book to get through. I made 2 whole videos just picking apart this book because it's such an interesting read. So I'll leave those 2 linked down below. But yeah, if you want nightmares, pick this guy up. The next one is From Below by Darcy Coates. This was my favorite Darcy Coates book I read this year, even though I read 12 of them. This one came out on top. Absolutely adore this book. It is so fun. I've never read a book like it. It just did something different for me than no book ever has before. It's about these group of sea divers? You call them divers. Wait, what is wrong with me? Dive team. Yeah, dive team, divers. And they are on a mission to find the SS Arcadia, which sunk like 80 years prior. Nobody ever knew what happened to it or found it. They're the first people to ever find it. So they get to go down and explore the ship. But while you have that line going, you also go back in time and see what actually happened to the SS Arcadia. And it is creepy. It is weird. It is so fun. This was one of my favorite books that I read this year. It was just a blast to read. I've never read anything like it. And thank you, Darcy Coates, for making me obsessed. The next one I don't have. So this one is Pen Pal by Dathan Arbach. I'm letting my friend borrow this one right now. But This one is so good. I loved every page of this. Holy crap, it's creepy, it's weird, it's fun. It is just everything I'm looking for in a book. It's one of those like, you either love it or hate it type of reads from what it seems online, the reviews and such, but I loved this book. I absolutely adored it. And I don't want to give anything away about it because the book doesn't give anything away, like the back cover. I think you just go into it, just trust me, if we have similar tastes in books, just read it and I think you will enjoy it because that book is so good. But yeah, I really don't want to give anything away because I went into it not knowing what it was about and I loved every freaking page of that book, every second. It is so disturbing. I loved it. Anyways, the next one we have here is Dark Harvest. This is by Norman Patridge and this is just a cute little fun novella Halloween story. I read it for the first time this year. I will read it every Halloween from, you know, until I'm 127. It's so good. It's just a story about this little pumpkin guy that comes to wreak havoc on a small town every year on Halloween, and all the boys in the town have to go to try to kill him, and the one who kills him gets like the prize of being able to leave the town. It's so fun. It's such a great October read. Highly recommend this guy, and man, yeah, that one blew me away too. Loved that guy. The next book that I absolutely adored this year was Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. I'm not a big like monster type of reader, but man, did I absolutely adore this book. I think it's well written. I think it's fun. There's a lot of illustrations in here that go with the story. You go every month of the year and you follow this town and this werewolf and what's happening, and it is just such a fun read. I absolutely loved this. Great October read as well. Next up here we have The Haunting of Leigh Harker. This is again by Darcy Coates. Honestly, there were like probably 4 of her books that were my favorite of the year, but I didn't want to have them all be Darcy Coates. But this one just kind of hit me again in a different way. It's a haunting story turned on its head, and it's just so different from anything I've ever read. It really touched me in a way that a book hasn't touched me like this before. I just loved it. I just love her. Pick up a Darcy Coates book. She really is fantastic. Oh yeah, this one I can't find either. Yeah, I'm not sure where this one ran off to, but this is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. And this one was just so, it's a thriller. It's really fun. I don't read like a crazy amount of thrillers, so ones that really blow me away I just want to talk about. But this one was so fun. It was a story about a family who got murdered, and then you have another story about a girl who's writing a book about the family who gets murdered, and then you have a third story about a mother and a child, a young girl trapped in a basement. It's really fun. I don't think I've ever read a book like this before, and yeah, I was really impressed by it. So yeah, definitely liked that guy. The next one, that's another Darcy Coates one. We'll skip that one. The next one I have is The Terror by Dan Simmons. This may have been my favorite book of the year. This and like, oh, they're all so good. There's a few that were my favorite. Maybe at the end I'll tell you like my top 3, but oh my god, I love this book so much. So yeah, another Dan Simmons, but he killed it with this book. It's a historical fiction about the Franklin expedition, 2 ships that went up to the Arctic to try to prove that there was a Northwest Passage that they could boat through. I don't want to give too much away, but just the horrible things that these men had to suffer, I can't even imagine. Just like lack of food, mutiny, scurvy, all of these horrible things. This book was rough to read. It's a disturbing book, and then on top of that you have another supernatural element of this like monster who's coming after them. But even without that, honestly, this book is fantastic. Like even if you just would have written a historical fiction about what happened to these people, I think it would have been just as good. The other stuff was interesting too, but I think like the stuff that really stuck with me was what these men probably did actually have to go through. It's a tough one to get through for that reason. And then the next one is The Martian by Andy Weir. This one's fantastic. This is about a man stuck on Mars. At its core, it's just like a survival story. How far would you go to survive? It's also comments on humanity and how people step up and come together to save this one man. Like it really is just a fucking awesome book. And then real quick, the last 2. This one is called Local Missing Woman, and this is by Mary Kubica. This one just kept me guessing the whole way through, and I feel like it's hard for me to get through an entire book, an entire mystery or thriller without figuring something out, and this one just kept me on my toes the whole time, and I think that's why I liked it so much. Know that there are people who don't enjoy the plot lines in it. I mean, as with every book, there's people that don't like all of these books too, but I just read some stuff online where I was like, oh, interesting, I didn't even realize that people didn't like what ended up happening, but I really enjoyed this book, so this made it on my list of this year as well. I thought that this was just really fun. It kept me guessing the whole way through. And then the last book is a surprise for me, but It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I wanted to step outside of my comfort zone and read the most popular book of 2020, which was this guy. I've never read a Colleen Hoover book before, and I fell in love with this book. It's not a perfect book by any means, but I think that the core themes are important to discuss. It's a difficult read. It's not just a love story like it sounds like on the back. So make sure you do your research to make sure you're okay reading about topics, because it's a tough book to get through, but I loved it. I sobbed through it. I thought it was a great book to read. I still do. I stand by that. So that made it on my list too. I didn't know how I would feel about it, and I was really surprised. I would say my top 3 books, if I could only pick 3, I would say From Below, The Terror, and Pen Pal. I'm gonna pick 4. Also The Martian, because I really loved this one. I think those would be like my top 4 books of the year. And Who Goes There? Oh, ow! I'm getting too excited. Ow! Okay, I should probably end this video before I hurt myself again. It's hard to choose. But those are my favorite books of 2022. Please leave your favorite books that you read this year down below. I will also do a video where I talk about every book that I read this year, but that will probably go up next week. But I wanted to just get this one out before the end of the year. So yeah, those are my favorite books of 2020, what? Okay, I think I need to go. I don't know what's happening here. Those were my favorite books. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys.